Welcome to episode 14 of Real Health Radio.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hello, and Chris Sandel here. Welcome to another episode of Real Health Radio. And on today's show, I have another guest with an interview, and today's guest is Shane Hubbard. Shane is a personal trainer and independent health researcher out of Southern California. While he enjoys participating in multiple facets of health and wellness, Shane focuses on stress management, nutrition, and fitness. Shane's philosophy on health flows through holistic principles. Through his passion project, which is Counterculture Health, Shane strives to bring awareness of real health to those who seek more than just an aesthetically pleasing body. With his experience with bodybuilding and holistic health, Shane provides a well-rounded perspective on male body dysmorphia, fitness, nutrition, and stress management. So I only recently discovered Shane through Maddie Moon's Mind Body Musing podcast. He had an episode on there recently, and I really liked what he had to say about male body image and issues around food. And it's a topic that gets much less attention than the female experience. So I want to invite him on the show and speak about that, amongst other things. So it was a really great chat. We look at body issues in terms of body dysmorphia, and he talks about his own experience with this, people's beliefs and expectations about fitness and exercise, and the human element to being a coach. And I think this is something that is very much missing a lot of the time, and it's something we touch on. So without further ado, let's get started. So welcome to the show, Shane. I'm really happy to have you and to join us today and talk about your side of things.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and your audience.
Cool. So for people who don't know about you, why don't you start off by just telling them a little about yourself, how you got into the whole health and nutrition field, and yeah, just to start with.
Sure. Okay. So I come from a long line of athletes. At the age of 4, my dad put me straight into sports, particularly baseball. And so I've kind of always had a fitness background. But it wasn't really until I got to the age of about 16 that's when I quit high school baseball. I just couldn't, really take it anymore, all the politics and everything. And so being an active family, my grandfather was really, really, really into nutrition and more the mainstream nutrition. And then knowing that I was about 16 years old, he knew that the best way to get me involved was to go through the bodybuilding route, because that's kind of every guy's dream is to, be nice and muscular and look good and everything like that. So he got me introduced that way and started off with, supplements and protein powders and showed me bodybuilding.com. And, just from there, it kind of just went wild. And after about a year and a half of that, I just didn't really I felt like I was at the end of the road. I felt like counting calories, eating not raw chicken breast, but eating, plain chicken breast just wasn't a lifestyle. It was kind of like this. I was living, this dream, and I wasn't seeing the results that I was promised. And so I got kind of kicked out of that. And I had a buddy in high school who got involved with CHEK, and I'm not sure if you know or familiar with him, but he's really big in the holistic lifestyle world. And so he turned me on to him. I bought his book. I read it, and I said, this is exactly the type of thing I was looking for. And I got so into it that I actually went and took his courses, and they ended up being very informational. I got a lot out of that. More than anything, the continual growth of understanding health from a different side of things, and how it's obviously holistic is kind of, there's a whole part to it. It's not just how you eat. It's not just how you exercise. It's how you think. It's how you move. It's how you operate in your daily life. It's your emotions, your mental state. So all these things, and just realizing how they're all interrelated was a big discovery for me. And so that's when I realized, hey, I really want to do this as a life. I want this to be my career. I want to be able to do the same kind of things he does. So that's how I got involved. Really, it kind of takes every step. And currently, I'm a personal trainer. I really was going down the holistic route, and then I just really saw kind of a disconnect with it. I felt like it was too hardcore, and I didn't think it was a good start for me. Although I think I'll end up there eventually. So I got my my certification as a personal trainer, and that's what I'm currently doing. I work at a gym, it's basically 6 or 8 hours a day working with different clients, and it's a little bit harder because it's kind of going backwards in terms of the clientele I'm working with is a little bit less familiar with what I know, and so I have to kind of not dumb it down, but I have to start at a smaller step and then work my way up.
Sure. And look, I think you have to be meeting people where they're at. And sometimes you get all of this new knowledge that you want to be sharing with people. And sometimes you, especially in the early days, you feel like you want to be pushing that onto them because you want to demonstrate how much you know about a particular topic or about this niche idea. But it is very important to be meeting someone where they're at and sharing with them information that's really helpful for them as opposed to more first showing what you know.
Oh, definitely. And that's the exact approach that I took in the beginning, is that I kind of was like, hey, did you know about this? And people would come to me more so with questions like, hey, my last trainer said I can't have carbohydrates at night. Is that true? And I was just like, wow, okay, I guess we're really going, from the basic levels of things. We're not even, going to the where I thought we were, with certain people, and just kind of seeing it was a very good learning lesson, because I had been so far removed from what mainstream media had taught people, because I had obviously been entrenched in kind of the more underground stuff, or at least what seemed to be underground. And so, people coming to me with these questions, that I really realized how tarnished a lot of the mainstream health information is, and how back and forth it is, and how, I don't know, I guess that bodybuilding kind of leaks into a lot of the mainstream, because that's where the bodybuilders are in the gyms and they're training the people. So the people are usually going straight to that first, and then they might find a practitioner later down the line, or, they might get lucky to run into one. But most people are running through the channel of, a gym and a personal trainer who has a very simple certification that allows him to work, or him or her, in a gym, versus someone who's a little bit more finite and a little bit more exact with what they're trying to do, and more well-rounded as well.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned Paul CHEK at the beginning. I remember when I was just finished up studying, I came across his book as well. I think it's the How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, and I really enjoyed reading it. It really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff at that stage, and I was at a time thinking about doing the CHEK certification. So how did you find training with them? How was that experience? Because, as I said, it was something I thought about doing at some point.
Well, it was an interesting experience. I went to the level 1, and I absolutely loved it. It was kind of the intro level. It definitely was the stepping stool to get to the next level. I would say that the learning curve from 1 to 2 was very drastic in terms of kind of their overall approach. Level 2 is a little bit more, the first 2 days, and I'm sure you already know the story as I've talked about it before, but the first 2 days are really talking about opening your mind and kind of having breaking that dogmatic mentality that a lot of trainers might have going in. And for me at the time, that was a little too much. It was kind of like I signed up, I paid for, being able to learn how to be a coach to your clientele base, and not anywhere did it say, hey, we're going to, take all of this, your belief system, so to speak, and totally crush it. And in the long run, I totally understand how I needed that at the time. And it was very important for me to have that process happen to me. But in the immediate moment, it was one of the scariest things I'd ever gone through, because it was like, hey, everything that you think exists, or however you want to think of it, is not true. And I like to think that I take everyone's word honestly, because I don't believe people just lie to you unless they want, it takes a long time for me to learn that somebody's lying to me. I take people honestly. So I was thinking, wow, if this is true, what is it what am I missing, and what have I been doing the last, whatever year? So going through that process was very eye-opening, and I think that I'll eventually go back and go through the certification again. At the time, though, it was too much to handle, so I kind of stepped back and said, okay, I'll handle that a little bit later in my life.
Okay. And I mean, when I think about Paul CHEK, I like a lot of his principles and his philosophy, and I do like some of the book, and then some of his stuff is just quite out there, and it doesn't sit particularly well for me, and it just gets a little bit crazy, if I'm being honest.
Right, you're exactly right, and that's exactly the approach I took after after I took his class. I said, you know what, I'm going to take the nutrition, the exercise part, and maybe some of the metaphysical side of spirituality and stuff like that, which I have absolutely no problem with. I would consider myself a very spiritual person, in the sense that I understand that part of life is a big part of other people's lives and how we do things, but I wasn't really ready to just dive into that 100%. I was more at the let's get the nutritional and the eating and the exercise down, and then I'll jump to that later.
Yeah, and that's the parts that I quite like of his stuff, that I found really useful when I was starting out. So over the years, so since then to where you are now, I mean, how have your beliefs around food changed?
Well, I would consider that book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, kind of my first realization that diets are not all it's cracked up to be. I mean, don't get me wrong. He kind of pushes the metabolic typing diet, which in a sense is still a diet, but it has probably the most well-rounded approach to diet as I could possibly find out there in the world. It's not very limited. It kind of lets you jump around. That being said, I think just knowing that it was a regimen and that it was something that you had to keep track of, and it was too pre-planned, and I got farther and farther away from that thinking. And then when I became a personal trainer, in order to try to get a hold of what I was doing everything at once. So I kind of went back to the diet thing, and people were asking me so many questions about diet, and I had experienced them all. And so I said, this part of that. But my underlying message to all of them was always, no diet is really going to solve your problems. It's more learning how to have a relationship with food and how to cater yourself and how you interact with food, and how you kind of your process of what you like, what you don't like, understanding that it's okay to, just because kale is healthy and you don't like it doesn't mean you have to eat it, that kind of thing. And a lot of people were turned off by that. And so for a brief moment, I had to kind of put my own philosophy on hold in order to keep my business. And I was really reliant on money at the time, so I said, you know what, I'm going to try to hybridize this and say, look, you can follow this, but be aware of this and understand this, and give him kind of the preconceived notion that this is the diet you chose, but it's not the end all be all. And so slowly people started kind of realizing, oh, I don't want to stick to this one thing, or I actually like this food more than anything. So they ended up coming around, and so I didn't have to kind of cater myself to that. And I really don't like to say that I had to worry about the money and change my philosophy, but I think we all go through a period where, what we want to do eventually becomes our job, and in the meantime we have to kind of meander and find a way to have a career and still do what we love to do, or at least teach what we love to teach. So I've kind of come a little more full circle with the approach. Now when I tell people anything that has to do with diet, I first say, listen, you're not going to be making humongous changes. I think that there's a couple techniques that we can use to help you become more conscious and aware of what you're eating and why and what you like and that kind of thing, and answer some of the questions. But I don't want you going on these crash diets. I don't want you just eating, fats and proteins, and that stuff's not going to, being restricted is not going to last. And so I'm slowly having to introduce that to them, because again, it's something they're not used to, and they don't necessarily trust me because, they see the diet books, they see the magazines, and everyone's saying, oh, I follow this diet and this is what I look like. So they pair the image with the diet, and they go, okay, if I want to look like that, I have to do this. And then they feel like a failure, or they feel, incomplete or insecure about the fact that they can't keep up with the diet because that's what they want to look at. And so it's a lot of what I do is breaking it down and showing them that just because this is what this does doesn't mean you can't do it a different way, and that sort of thing.
Sure. And I would say I find that sometimes the pendulum can swing too far in both directions. So you have people who are, I've only got to follow a diet, I need to follow a diet, like just tell me the diet that I should be following. And then the other side of that becomes I've got to do this intuitively, so I can never listen to health information. I've got to always just respect what my taste buds are and what my body wants, etc. And I think there is really a middle ground between those two, that there is a role for someone to be saying, you know what, based on what's going on, I think these are some foods that would be better for you to be eating, or these are ways that would be better for you to be eating, or these are things that you'd probably do better avoiding. I can't say this categorically for you, but try it out and see. And so there's that middle ground of using nutritional information where it's helpful as opposed to it being restrictive and dogmatic.
Right. And understanding that it can change at any moment, and that there's a lot of different ways you can tackle it. And that's the kind of closed-mindedness that I think a lot of, not that it's their fault, I'm not saying that, I'm not blaming them, but I'm saying that's in the mainstream media and the kind of people that I see on a daily basis, that's the mindset that they currently have when it comes to things, that these are the only foods that cause this result. And, and like you said, there's this kind of middle ground that you have to bring them to, and understanding there's balance, there's not just this or that. It's kind of a mixture of a little bit of everything. And you can use certain, and to kind of go back to the intuitive eating part, I think that was an interesting, because that's something I went through personally, where I was bouncing back and forth the extremes, and I no matter how much I was told, you need balance, you need balance, you need balance, I kept finding myself kind of bouncing between each extreme. And just, in the last 4 months, I think I've kind of landed a little bit more in the middle, and now I have a better mindset and approach to, helping my own personal clients. But a lot of my job when it comes to nutrition is just breaking down the misconceived ideas that that the mainstream media kind of feeds people. And a lot of people pay attention to Dr. Oz and things like this, where they're pushing certain things, and you have to say, well, look, they've got products to sell, and that kind of avenue of life. And so I as a personal trainer, I think I'm spending a lot more time kind of deconstructing that initial mindset, very much like my own experience at the CHEK Institute. So that's probably the majority of my nutritional bounds in terms of my own clients. Yeah,
and I would agree with you in the sense that a lot of what I do with people is getting them to unlearn things, as opposed to just bringing new information to the table. It's normally that we have to knock off like 4, 5, 10 different preconceived ideas before we can then start to bring in any of the new ones, because health, more than so many other aspects of life, everyone knows what they should be doing, in inverted commas. Like, everyone has an opinion about what's healthy, what's not healthy, and what such and such did and it got them this result, etc. And it's not like someone, and it's very rare that someone's coming to me and they're a complete clean slate, where it's just tell me what I need to be doing. I don't have any biases. I don't have any ideas of myself. Just help me along the road. Most people are coming to me where they already know a lot of the time what they think that they should be doing, and there's often some resistance about changing that stuff.
Yeah, and wouldn't you say that the resistance has a lot to do with the fact that we, as human beings, kind of resist change in a way, because we're very comfortable just being where we are, regardless of whether or not that's the best place for us?
Definitely. I think people want to choose the easier route, and whatever they know and what is more familiar is probably part of that. The other big part of it is most of the time people are doing things that they believe will result in weight, or maintaining the weight that they're at, or helping them lose weight, etc. And that's a big part of it. And that the fear is then, if I do what you're telling me to do, or if I change what you ask me to change, it's going to lead to changes in my body weight. And I'd say the majority of times that's where the issues are coming from.
Yeah, and I've experienced that as a trainer. A lot of people actually end up gaining weight training with me. And at first I was, my thinking was, okay, that doesn't make any sense. They must be doing something, different. They must not be following the recommendations I've been giving them. But I did a little bit more kind of in-depth learning about that specifically, and it's very common for people to gain weight on an exercise regimen for a lot of different reasons. One of them being is the body is going under more stress, not necessarily the kind of stress that you might think of, like, you lose a job or something like that, but just physical stress. And so the natural reaction for the body is to, store things, or at least have this kind of reaction where cortisol goes up, and so now your stress hormones are a little higher, and people are worried about that. And I'm like, listen, it could be water, you could be gaining muscle, and so all they're paying attention to, like you said, is that number on the scale instead of how they feel. Are they sleeping better? Is there more mental clarity? Do they have more energy? And 9 times out of 10, when I ask those questions, they start going, oh wow, you're right. All I was doing was focusing on the scale instead of noticing, my skin's better, I sleep better, I have more energy throughout the day, I don't need as much coffee. And so that's the kind of deconstructing that I really think that I'm doing. At least, I've only been working at this particular gym and as a trainer at this gym for about 4 months. So being able to just have those months to kind of, like I was talking about earlier, is deconstruct and kind of get them to think differently about what it means to be healthy is a big, big part of it in the mainstream world.
Yeah. And I know a lot of the time sort of issues with females and disordered eating gets a fair bit of airtime, but not so much from the male experience. So is there stuff that you can talk about from this angle?
Yeah, I think that I think it's kind of interesting because the male side of disordered eating kind of gets shadowed by the fact that they're working towards a goal of muscle building, and if I eat this certain amount of foods and I'm boosting my testosterone, and it's kind of hidden by the more muscle thing. And I think that what a lot of guys tend to do is they, in the name of dieting down or in the name of whatever it might be, they kind of hide behind it, mostly because I think in our society, and I know that you're in London, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So in the U.S., I don't know if it's much different, but we very much hold the male perspective of not showing any kind of weakness. And so I think there's a lot of males out there who feel and have the same kind of experience as maybe the female dieter, bodybuilder, or body composition person. They kind of go through very similar things, but they're afraid to speak out about it because it might make them look weak. It might make them look inferior. They might worry, okay, well, are women going to be attracted to somebody who's insecure about their body? That kind of thing. And that's where I completely differ. I have absolutely no problem admitting that I've had tons of body issues. I mean, growing up, I was a rather husky kid. So, when I had a best friend who was lean and, he looked like, a model in terms of his body composition. So I was consistently being, compared to that. And so my mind automatically started saying, well, if women are attracted to him, maybe that's what I have to be. And so at a very young age, that's kind of the body dysmorphia that I grew into. And being a shorter guy, I'm 5'6". So, a lot of times through my life, women weren't attracted to shorter guys. And because I was husky, I kind of looked bigger. And so that all kind of played into it. And so I always had this kind of chip on my shoulder about looking a certain way and being lean. And a lot of guys, regardless of height or, whatever it might be, have that same issue. And I was listening to a podcast not too long ago that was talking about the psychology behind bodybuilding and why those guys and why they just can't get enough and why they end up turning to steroids, some of them. And it's really in my opinion, what he was talking about is an even further case of being insecure with your own body. And not to the sense that you have to look a certain way, but society kind of pushes these ideas onto us based on, just same goes for, women and the runway models. And everyone's saying you got to be a size 0. And I could go on for hours, but the point is that I think males just don't have that, I don't know how to describe it, but I guess that voice out there that's really saying, hey, it's okay to have, these feelings about your body. I mean, it's very common, especially in the world that we live in. And so, like I said earlier, growing up that way, I was always a little bit hesitant to speak about it. And then I realized, it's just not worth, I'm not worried about what people think of me. I really want to just be honest. I think that there's I think people crave honesty, especially in, maybe in their lives when they don't get a lot of it, or it's just not out there as much and people can't be as genuine as they usually are. And so I really wanted to break that mold and say, you know what, I've got no problem admitting that I've had, body dysmorphia issues. And I've kind of seen myself always at this perspective as I'm only as good as my attractive as my body's attractive. And so I think just being that voice for that, or at least being a voice in that kind of collective whole, really is going to help bring more people out and say, look, he said it. It's there's power in numbers, and so as soon as somebody steps up and starts making something known, that momentum grows, and I just think that that's a good thing to get out there, especially as males. That there's not a lot of us out there saying that. Honestly.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing that you're able to be that honest about things and talk about it. And what's the reaction when you said that and you brought it up before? Has it been a positive thing that you've noticed?
For the most part, I think that there's still a lot of there's still a lot of people being hesitant towards, especially males, towards that, because they don't like to admit that that's really what's going on. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like, Sigmund Freud. I can't pick people apart and figure out if that's really what they're thinking. But my general kind of consensus is that a lot of people aren't even really aware that they have body dysmorphia, kind of because of that whole thing I was talking about earlier with males specifically. And I just speak about that because obviously I am one, but it's just hiding kind of behind the I want to be as fit as possible excuse. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think there's people that want to get to a very low body fat percentage and they take it as a challenge. I think that's great, but more than not, I think that eventually they kind of crash. I mean, look, if you're familiar with Sylvester Stallone, he's in his 70s, and I think he keeps about a 8% body fat year round, and he does tons of drugs. And I'm just thinking, is this guy ever going to be okay with the way he looks? Is he going to be okay with aging? Is he going to be okay with being a 70-year-old man? And I just look at that and I go, is that what the younger generations are looking at and saying, if he can do it and if he's doing it, I should be able to do it too? And I just think it's kind of a negative approach towards how we treat our bodies, because I think in the long run, if we're kind of limiting ourselves to how we look, we're not really harnessing the full potential of who we are and understanding that we're more than just this physical being. I mean, when we die, that's it. Our bodies are gone. So I think it's better to bring that awareness to people that, look, yeah, it's great to be fit. It's great to be in good health, but let's focus more on you as a whole person instead of this person who eats chicken breast broccoli and goes to the gym 6 times a day. I think that there's more to life than that. But at the same time, like you said, I don't like to push that on people. I like to give them that option and let them know that there's other people out there that think like that. If they feel, kind of stuck in this whole, I don't want to be a bodybuilder, I don't want to be a figure competitor, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I think there are different reasons why people do things, and that it's kind of breaking that down and starting to understand what someone's genuine motivation behind something. Because you can be going for the same goal where for one person that's a very good thing that they're trying to achieve and it's very positive within their life, and for someone else it's very destructive. And so understanding where both of those are coming from. And when you were talking about all that, reminded me, have you seen a documentary called Bigger, Faster, Stronger?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Just an absolutely fascinating documentary. For anyone who hasn't seen it or doesn't know about it, it's on Netflix. I would highly recommend watching it. But it's looking at steroid use and guys trying to get bigger, and it's from a guy who was into powerlifting, and he and his 2 brothers are into powerlifting, and just looking at how steroids have come into the sport, and looking at how men's bodies have changed over the last 40, 50 years, and the male perspective of issues around the body. And looking at, there's a great scene where they look at all of the different G.I. Joes going from like 1970 to now, and just how much they've changed from someone who had a little bit of a better body to these big, ginormous things with massive arms, etc. And just that change in expectations, and in the same way that expectations of women have changed and where their body should be, the same thing has definitely happened to men.
Oh, definitely. And inadvertently, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger really set that pedestal at its highest point, because people still look back at his body and they go, that is one of the greatest bodybuilding physique competitors the world has ever seen. And so, if you look around the timeline that he kind of won that that initial competition and really set the stage for everyone else, like you said, you start seeing GI Joes kind of, and just the, a military, I don't want to get too into it, but the military, the wars we went through, and being a macho man, and kind of changing the way we think of male and female roles in society. And that's another thing that I've listened to quite a bit about, how society has changed, and how we've been changed by just our history and what our society has kind of put an emphasis towards based on the different aspects of life and experiences that our country specifically and other countries in the world have gone through, and just how it shapes the individual over the long term. And you're right, the body image has become a lot different, a lot bigger, I should say, of importance, in the last 50 or so years.
Yeah, and it, as you said earlier on, it is affecting men. It's not just women. I do think women have a much tougher time because of it, and that body image is so much more, or how someone looks as a female is just so much more ingrained in their self-esteem and in their psyche, more so than men. But that's definitely not to say that men escape from this and they aren't suffering with the same issues.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting, just to touch on that one last time, is that, again, I think that most of the time when it, and this is the military perspective, I think that kind of leaked down into the modern day man, is that we're not allowed to have emotions, and if we are, we're considered less of a man. We're not allowed to have an opinion and be insecure and all these different things. And I think approaching, if you kind of handle that first and see it from that point of view, and realize that, yes, men and women have different hormones, and we kind of have different, we're, yin and yang, and one side's one side. But at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with a man who's gone through certain things in his life and feels like, hey, I don't want to be judged just for my body, or I don't want to be, being able to talk about that and have that openness is completely fine. And I think breaking that initial barrier is really where at least where I've started in my own life, and understanding that really let me open up more towards just understanding it's okay to have these emotions, it's okay to feel this way, and it's okay to, go through what I personally went through, and what many men have gone through, and thinking that if they don't have a nice body, they're somehow less of a person.
Yeah. So with your personal training today, are there specific types of clients that you work with, or at this stage you're just working fairly across the board?
It's fairly across the board, and the gym that I work for is more so broken up into a lot of different departments. I actually don't get to pick my own clients. So I'm essentially a personal trainer at this gym, and then we have a fitness managing division, which goes through all the, the paperwork and the sales and that sort of thing. And then as soon as they agree to training and agree to the contract and everything, they get paired with one of the, I think we have about 8 trainers now. And I'm one of the only male trainers there currently. Most of the other ones have left. So I actually get a lot of different clients. I work with clients that have, it can range from knee problems to back problems. I've got overweight clients. I've got obese clients. I work with kids. I work with athletes. Some of them are athletes at their high school or their college, former athletes, desk jockeys. I mean, you name it, I've pretty much worked with that type of person. So it's quite broad, and I think that that's one of the greatest experiences as an initial. I've only been working at this gym for 4 months, and I'm a fairly new trainer. So being able to have that wide variety really gives me an interesting scope. But at the same time, it shows me kind of where the majority lies, as well as learning a little bit more about specific things like, low back pain, or not. Like I have one client who's obese, and I learned this when I was studying, but they really can't go into a prone position because the blood pressure in their body just goes too high. So learning all these little intricate things, as well as finding kind of common ground with everyone, has been a real great experience so far.
Okay, and what are there commonalities in terms of why people are coming to you? Is it mostly weight loss, or is it really across the board again?
Most people come to me with the idea that they need to lose weight, and for a vast majority, I don't really look at it that way. I mean, there's obviously if you're going to do anything with an obese client, it's going to be better than where they were. So getting them to really understand that what they're doing, although they might not see progress as fast as they had been promised, which is another thing that I'm kind of disappointed in the mainstream media is, lose 30 pounds in, 7 days or whatever it is. It's crazy. But, their focus is weight because that's what they've been told they need to do. But a lot of the questions that I ask have nothing to do with weight, where it's like, have you seen your doctor? Have you gotten your blood work done? How do you feel when you get up out of bed? Do you notice your head rushes less? Do you have easier time getting off the ground? Very simple and kind of questions they're not used to having to answer, but what it really does for them is open their minds to all the different things that their health journey is attributing to. And whether it be on my side, it's mostly fitness and nutrition, but for the most part, it's getting to recognize that there's other things than just what the scale weight says. Because a lot of people will come to me and they're like, I haven't lost any weight, but I feel immensely better. And I said, well, to be honest, you don't have a whole lot of weight to lose. I had one girl who came to me and she was 150 pounds. I think she was like 5'7". And she was like, I need to lose weight. And I was like, are you sure? Like, are you kidding me? And she's like, yeah, I don't like my legs and I want them to be more toned. And I said, oh, you just want more muscle mass. She goes, yeah, but someone told me I needed to lose weight around my thighs. And I said, okay, so, they're coming to me with kind of this general idea of what they want to do. And obviously, me being and having the background that I have, I kind of see past all that and I go, okay, this is what you actually need. And a lot of times I go, this wasn't the route I thought we'd take, but I'm glad we got to the finish line. So, a lot of times it's just my main goal working in this particular gym is to get people to change the way they think about health, because I think mainstream health and focusing specifically on weight only is very destructive.
Yeah, and I would say a lot with people who are starting to get back into exercise and their expectations about how things are going to change and what's going to happen in terms of weight loss and all that has been massively skewed from shows like The Biggest Loser, where people are losing an inordinate amount of weight within a week. And what is classified as a week across those shows, if you actually read accounts of people who have been on the show, a week can vary from anywhere from about 7 days to up to 3 weeks.
Right.
But it then really changes people's belief about what exercise should be. Like, exercise has to be something that's grueling to the point where you're nearly sick, where you have to be just working so hard. And you look and see these people who are very big and who haven't been doing any exercise, and starting them instead of where they should be, which is building up and gently, they're starting them all guns blazing, where they're doing boot camp style stuff or getting them to run on a treadmill for an inordinately long time, where it's just so damaging. But that then becomes the norm of, this is what I need to do to lose weight, and if I do this, I'm going to be losing a tremendous amount of weight very, very quickly.
Yeah, and kind of two things to touch on that. I was watching a lecture done by Robert Lustig, who I at first I didn't really enjoy his lectures, and now I can't get enough of them. But he was saying that as a doctor, that there's not a bit of research that suggests that that fitness and exercise and that kind of thing actually helps you lose weight. So what he was trying to say is that, yes, you're in a negative energy balance, but exercise alone has never been shown in any research to actually help somebody lose weight. In fact, most of the time they gain weight because they're improving their muscle mass. And so that kind of bit of information, whether I know it's 100% true or not, I thought was very interesting. And then just the second point is I actually had the opportunity of talking to somebody who was on The Biggest Loser, and I had a lot of questions to ask him, and it was kind of this chat room area, and he showed me a shirt and everything. It was really cool. But one of the things he told me is that, the what they go through, none of them would ever do again. That's the first thing he kind of said. And he said, while there's the experience of going through, being that exposed to exercise that quickly, he said that it's not all what you see on TV. A lot of that is like a 2 or 3 takes. So they're very much cutting out all the other stuff they do. Not that I agree with what they're doing, but he said that it's not all what you see. There's a lot of kind of staging of certain things, and I thought that was super, super interesting, because that, again, that's people taking a little bit of what they think is going on and masking it over their whole approach to fitness. And so a lot of times in my own practice and the people that I work with, they will get upset when they go, why aren't you kicking my butt? And I'll be like, well, what do you mean? And I said, I want to be sweating and out of breath at the end of the session. That's what I hired you for. And I said, I don't understand. Are you saying that you just want to go to the gym and sweat and yeah, I just want you to kick my butt because I won't do it to myself. And so I have to sit down with these people and kind of gently explain to them it's not all about, being on the verge of puking, and that's not what exercise is. That's not sustainable. That's not, I don't know what you've been watching, but that's not what this is, and that's not what that's not what I practice. And so, sometimes that turns them off, and they say, well, I was sold, this bill of goods or whatever, and I'm like, okay, well then I'm sorry, you might have to get another trainer because I'm not going to do what the gym wants me to do because I know that's not correct, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I want people to enjoy doing exercise and enjoy the process. And that doesn't mean that it's always going to be easy. There are times where, I do exercise a couple of times a week, or exercise every day walking the dog, but I do weights a couple of times a week, and it is tough. But I don't ever finish a session where I feel like I'm going to be throwing up. And I will be failing on certain weights or whatever, but there's failing and then there's failing, where you're failing to the point where you're going to injure yourself because you set something up so badly. And that's what I often see on those kind of shows, and that's where I think most people think that they need to be training their intensity at, and it's just not true. And that it should be much more controlled. It should be where someone finishes up a session and they can get on with their everyday life. It's not that they finish up there and they then need to go and sleep for 2 hours because they're so wiped out.
Absolutely. And, I get people to come to me and go, I couldn't walk the other day because of the exercise you gave me. I said, and sometimes I've caught myself apologizing. Oh, did I ruin your day? Are you okay? Is everything good? And they're like, oh no, I love it. And I understand that from a sense of, when I wake up in the morning and I'm sore, I take it as, okay, I worked hard. I'm never, purging at the end of a set or anything like that. So I understand that kind of, okay, I worked, sense of accomplishment. I did something great. But, if you're, incapacitated and you can't get out of your bed or something like that, I consider that maybe, not something to strive for day after day after day.
Yeah. And it'll happen every now and again when you push a little harder or you do a new routine or whatever. But you're right. It should be infrequent, especially after someone starts doing exercise fairly regularly. I think, and I know this for me personally, if I have a couple of months where I don't do any weights, the first session back, even if I do things at a lower setting, for 2, 3, 4 days afterwards, I'll be pretty sore. But once you get to that stage where you're doing things pretty regularly, you shouldn't be getting that kind of pain and stiffness most of the time after you train. It should be very infrequent.
Right, and that's another thing that, explaining to most people, it takes that bit of, sitting down and saying, hey, you don't have to be, crippled every time you come to the gym. That's not the idea. The idea is, like you said earlier, you want to enjoy exercise, and I think for a lot of people, it's more of a chore. It's more, this is what I have to do in order to look better. This is what I have to do to lose weight, and just breaking that mindset that yes, fitness will aid in your overall health, and movement is good for tons of markers that are intangible to the physical, to the naked eye. But yeah, it's just a lot. If I had to kind of sum everything up, that what my main job is, it's deconstruction and unlearning.
Yeah. And so are you providing much nutritional advice with these people as well? Or is it more just the personal training?
It's probably 80% personal training and about 20% nutritional advice, only because I'm trying to stay within my scope of practice. I don't want to be, infringing upon any of the rules of what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. That being said, I do give a lot of recommendations, and I have kind of a newsletter that I send out every now and then that kind of passively allows me to get the information and make them conscious of what's going on without without kind of diagnosing them and saying, hey, this is what you need to do, this, that, and the other thing. I do get a little bit of room to work with meal plans. I can, for the most part, I believe I can just construct meal plans and answer questions. But, if someone comes to me and says, I have a thyroid condition, what can you do to help me? That's where I have to kind of step back and say, that's something for, a nutritionist or an RD or someone with a little bit more experience in your unique condition. But when it comes to weight loss and just eating better and focusing on whole foods and that kind of thing, I'm able to help a lot of people because they're at a very, very low level. Just getting them to eat more than 2 meals a day, or to get them to, convert to maybe eating a little bit better in terms of higher quality nutrient dense foods, instead of, I had one lady she had like Pringles, chocolate, and a soda for lunch. And so, if I'm dealing with that kind of person, I can do a lot of good within my scope of practice to kind of bring them to say, hey, let's try to, change things here, introduce this here, and try to, change it up a little bit. And more than anything, though, I have to say it's more about the psychology than anything. If there's one thing I could tell a personal trainer to do, is to focus on the psychology and the habit and training side of things, because there's no shortage of information about nutrition out there. Most people that come to me go, I know I should be eating veggies, I know I should be eating protein, that's not working for me, help me out. And so the new client in the 21st century in 2015 and 16 is going to be looking for ways for their personal trainer or whoever it is they're working with to help them with habit changing techniques, to open their minds about certain things when it comes to how to do that versus what they need to do. People know carrots are good. People know lettuce and salads and all these things. If it was working, we wouldn't have the obesity numbers that we have in this country specifically. More than anything, it's getting them to work with themselves. And I say that by most people are consistently fighting themselves on foods and staying kind of in this cycle of thing and not really understanding what they're doing. So I think that the industry would do a lot of good focusing more on that side of things than just saying, here's a meal plan, follow it and you'll be fine. Because that's a piece of paper. That's not, it's not really getting them to do anything.
Yeah. And look, I'm really glad you said that, because I spend a lot of time focusing on this with clients and talking about the fact that just because you know something doesn't mean you're actually going to do it, and having to work out what needs to happen so that someone then follows through. And if someone then doesn't follow through on something, like, why is that happening? So it's not about belittling someone or saying just do it. It's like, okay, well, let's try and pick this apart and see why you're not following through on that, or why you're finding it so difficult to have a snack in the morning, or whatever it may be. And is it we need to put a little reminder on the phone? Is it that we need to do this certain exercise? But very much looking at habit formation. There's a great article I read last week by a guy called Gary Vaynerchuk. He is someone who used to have a show called Wine Library TV and then set up a media company, and he's quite a big person in terms of social media. And he was talking about the fact that in the last year he's finally got into doing exercise, and he said for very, very long periods of his life he never really did it, and he was always someone who is so good at following through on every other aspect of his life when he chooses to, but exercise he really struggled with. And he then did some searching on this and why he was really struggling. He said that he just needed to get someone who kept him accountable. And so he said he got a personal trainer. His personal trainer, he sees it, I think it's 5:30 every morning or something along those lines. And he said that was what he needed to do to get him to do exercise. And the point isn't that that's what everyone needs to do, but he was saying that finding what it is that means that you will follow through on it. So is it you need to have someone else who's accountable for it? Is it that you need to do whatever it is? And I think starting to make that shift from I need more knowledge about what's healthy or what's the best exercise for this or the best exercise for that is how can I be doing things that mean that I show up and that I'm being consistent? And that's just so much more important.
I agree 100%. I think that in most people's lives, and I've actually got a couple of my clients that I've worked with very personally on stuff kind of outside of personal training and just getting to know them as a person. And a lot of times what people need more than anything, and I'm just saying this from experiences, is some sort of support. When I get down to why somebody will not, follow through with the meal plan that I gave them, or trying to work at even a more micro level of working just with the first meal of the day or whatever it might be, more times than not, it's because it comes from kind of an emotional a standpoint or some kind of emotional background. I don't want to talk specifically about any one client that I've had, but I've had, people where all they really needed to do is like vent and just say, hey, I need to talk about my life because I've got these really big things that you know nothing about because you're just my, fitness trainer. And before I can go anywhere with the nutrition side of things, I need to handle this other stuff. And so just being, that supportive person in their lives actually makes a big difference on how not only do they trust you, but knowing that someone actually cares about what they're doing. It's not just, hey, I made this, you should eat this, that, and the other thing. That's not really being personal. Going into them and saying, hey, I want to ask you these questions. Let's talk about this. Let's focus on this. Let's, tell me a little bit about, your history with this and that and the other thing. They start recognizing that you care about them. And that completely changes. And this is the other thing I've been studying a lot recently is just mindset. It completely changes their mindset towards just what it means to be healthy. And so they start trusting you, or they start trusting whoever it is that's going about with them. And that obstacle, which I find more times than not is one of the biggest ones, is either removed or at least parts of it have been taken out. And so just simply being, a human with them, being on a personal level with them, they recognize and they break down these walls and they start going, oh my God, now I'm eating, the first meal of the day every morning and I feel 10 times better. And all I needed to do was just feel like someone actually cared about me. So that's one thing that I think a lot of personal trainers specifically don't pay as much attention to because it's not taught to them. And it's kind of something you have to go out and find on your own, is that there's a huge emotional component to why habits aren't being changed.
Yeah. And I agree with everything you said there. And it reminds me of Scott Abel talks a lot about the problems with coaches being that too much of it is focused on the nutrition side or the training specific side, and less of it is on being a real genuine human being and understanding the person you have in front of you, and that they are an emotional being, and that there's lots of different things that are impacting on it. And if you're just focused on the very black and white stuff and you're not understanding all of the other things that come into it, you're going to just miss so much. And so when you can be that real person, people very much respond to that.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's that. And if you're a trainer out there, you're somebody who's looking to get in the fitness industry, I would focus on learning more about that if that's not already your personality. Just because my prediction is going to be that more personal trainers are going to fall off because that component is missing, and less people are going to be drawn to you as a trainer if you don't have that component, because that's where it's going. As a practitioner, no matter what field you're in, people want someone they can relate to. They're tired of, military style boot camps. Like, that's great if you just want to get your butt kicked, but to really change your health, being a whole person, really being able to connect with them on that level is I think the strongest attribute to have. Even if you're new and you're just learning how to do everything, that would be my personal perspective.
Yeah. And so where are you wanting to be going with all this stuff? Because I know it sounds as though you're in this earliest stages of your journey and you're working at the gym and you're getting clients, but probably not doing it in the way that you would ideally like to be. So where do you see all of this going for you?
I definitely like working with people one-on-one. I am building kind of my online clientele, or I'm trying to get everything going with there. But, where I want to end up, it's a very good question. I think that in terms of a broad spectrum of, calling it whatever it might be, it's definitely the holistic route. That being said, I think that my calling is to work with people at the very first level of things, especially in the early part of my career, because I think that's where most of the work needs to be done. I think that I will grow with my clients or my clientele base as I get more experience. So I might not work with people at the personal training level for my whole career. I think that I'm definitely making a shift towards more the nutritional side of things, and then kind of branching into stress management as well as emotional healing and emotional, kind of, I don't really know what to call it. I guess it would be emotional management and knowing how to handle emotions on that thing. So I think I'm definitely getting further and further away from the physical side, because I see I don't see the growth there. I think that a lot of times people can get a benefit from working out, but it really kind of, in my opinion, stops there unless you're trying to be an Olympic athlete or a professional athlete. I think most people need a good nutritional guidance. They need emotional support, and they need stress support, because those three kind of are always evolving, especially in the world that we live in today, where we're working 9-to-5 jobs and we don't have a lot of time to do things. So I think there's more room to evolve and grow there in those three aspects. So I think as my career goes on, that's stress management, emotional healing, and kind of nutrition management and guidance.
Cool. So if people want to find out more about you, Shane, where should they be going?
I think probably right now, because I'm definitely new in the social media world, I have a Facebook page that is dedicated to my passion project, which is called Counterculture Health. So if you go to Facebook and just enter that, you'll see my logo. It's just 2 C's and an H in a circle, that kind of thing. So if you pick that out, you can go there. I also have a website. It's kind of like a blog hybrid. I have my YouTube channel on there as well. So if you just go to counterculturehealth.com, there's the YouTube links there. I've got my blogs there as well if you want to check out some of that stuff. And then if you have Instagram, it's just Counterculture Health. And so I'm on all these different social media sites, but I think the best place to go would probably be my website, because that's just kind of the hub of everything. And from there, you can kind of go to every other little place.
Okay, perfect. Well, look, I will put all of those details in the show notes so people can find it that way.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, look, it's been great chatting to you, Shane. It sounds as though, as I said, you're at the start of something, but you have some really great ideas, and it was really lovely chatting, and I know people are going to benefit from this.
Oh, thank you very, very much for having me. I think it's awesome that I got to connect with you and talk about health with someone else with the same kind of passion as I think I do.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7, health.com.